Black women are androgynous hermaphrodites. This is why their children are confused as it relates to gender roles, masculinity, and femininity. This is why girls are masculine and boys are feminine. They both model themselves after their mothers and choose which aspects to adopt based on whichever behavior is rewarded or punished. Girls are rewarded for being masculine, boys are rewarded for being feminine. Girls are punished, ridiculed for being feminine, and boys are punished for being masculine, oftentimes by society itself. Similar to the Willie Lynch letter, boys who are masculine are destroyed publicly as to instill fear in the other males by being murdered, beaten, or imprisoned. These executions are displayed publicly for all to see. The George Floyd murder, the Trayvon Martin murder, the Castile murder, the many murders that happen publicly, oftentimes by unarmed black men. Imagine those who was actually armed. Recently, a man was shot 60 times by the police. A black man. This is an attack to prevent the black males who are not killed to figure out how can they not be killed. What can they do to avoid this brutality? And they come to the conclusion, if only they refuse or avoid confrontation with white males. Just like the Willie Lynch letter, when the mother saw the man, the husband, get beat, lynched, tied to horses, torn to pieces, burnt alive, she knew that she was going to teach her sons to never be in confrontation with the slave master. They call it frozen independence. She would be the man of the household, and she would teach the boys to be compliant and subservient to the white man. So when they raise up and grow up, they would be bred to be slaves, trained to be slaves, trained to eat out the hands of the white man. This will happen when the black woman decided with the United States government. This happened during Vietnam. During Vietnam, the Vietnam War in the 1960s and the 1970s, also during the so-called civil rights movement, a lot of black men was out of the house. They was either organizing Black Panthers, Martin Luther King, Nation Islam, or they was in Vietnam. So the household was dominated by women and the children. Before the men came back from Vietnam, the government created programs to give these women money and housing. But in order for them to get this housing and money, the black women, they had to agree to be divorced or to be single mothers. This isolated the men from the households. They came back to communities in which they was no longer needed or wanted. They were on drugs. They didn't get any opportunities. They didn't get any benefits from the GI Bill. They was excommunicated from the black community. And a lot of these men who was excommunicated, they created gang criminal organizations, underworld organizations to try to make a living. But the household themselves was ran by these women. And it's created a culture of so-called baby mamas. And these baby mamas had to both be men and women at the same time. They had to be mothers and fathers. And this affected their genetic structure, their hormones, their molecules. A lot of women started to develop masculine physical characteristics and mental characteristics. And a lot of these girls and boys, they model their masculine characteristics off of these women that's raising them. Like a Tupac, he's over emotional, over extravagant in his speech. He's basically a woman in a man's body because he learned how to behave and how to speak and how to everything he know about his being came from his mother. He didn't really model himself after his father because he never really knew him. And Tupac became like a archetype for black male masculinity. So people looking at these men who was raised by women and model themselves after them, but the source of their behavior and their antics come from this woman who has both the male and female characteristics. And the girls, they get their masculine characteristics from the woman too. They want to be the boss. They want to be dominant. They want to be in control. They want to, because they saw this is the reality. The woman is the big boss. The man is a little punk, a little coward. He gets into the corner. He's only useful for reproduction purposes. Like the island of Lesbos in the ancient Aegean Sea in the Hellenistic period. But the so-called black woman, I'm not going to say they chose this destiny, but they continue it. And they think they can be a man and a woman at the same time. And this is why a bulldagger butch thinks she's a man, and a feminine woman is more interested in getting a bulldagger masculine woman than an actual man. And what can be done about this? What can the so-called black man do about this dynamic? A similar situation happened in the book of Ezra in the Bible, 1st and 2nd Ezra, in which the men of the Israelites who came out of Persia, who was allowed to go back to the Jerusalem, because the Persians rebuilt Jerusalem and rebuilt the temple, and they allowed the children of Israel to go back. But a lot of the men who came out of Persia, they started to get women of other nationalities, because who was in Jerusalem at the time were the Ishmaelites, who are still there now. So the Israelite men was going to these other women nationalities, and it's probably because the women of Judah or Israel didn't really respect the Israelite men because they were being dominated by the Persians and the Babylonians. So they ain't no telling what they were doing that caused the men to want to not be with them. But in the book of Ezra, 1st and 2nd Ezra, God told Ezra to tell the men of Judah and Israel to put aside their strange women, because a lot of the women were actually complaining to God about it. All the men was dealing with these strange foreign women. So I think in order for the so-called Negro female to be corrected, a lot of the so-called black men will have to go and get these other nationalities in masses in order for the so-called Negro female, androgynous, hermaphrodite black woman to realize the folly in that reality, that they could be a man and a woman at the same time, and they just gonna be raising children. This is a litter. It's like a stray dog raising a bunch of puppies. You know, this is like a bestiality. It's like an animalistic reality. But just like in the book of Ezra, the black so-called American Negro will have to go and get these strange foreign women in order for these American Negro black females to correct themselves. This is in the book of Ezra. And that's about it.